friends. Hello, friends. We finally back live. And whoever is in love, happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, happy Valentine's Day.
And who doesn't have love, I wish you to find today. And we found our love to paint. And today we will talk about blacks. And I'm losing my voice. So apparently it's one of the most, interest now these days. Everybody talk about blacks. So that's why we already created 3 programs about blacks. And mostly it was about our blacks. A couple weeks ago, we had a program about chromatic blacks. And today, we want for sure talk about a little bit more about all that. And like always, I know many people watching us all over the world. So you ask the questions and on the chat, and we will immediately answer. But before that, George prepared a special program for you. It's about 12 minutes, so then stick with us.
And it's, of course, typical of what I do. It's somewhat scientific or...
No, never ever it's easy. So you should see...
But it really helps us give a different perspective. You know, we as artists, we talk about, what different color mixtures, and we talk about undertones, and we talk about cool and warm and things like that. So I actually wanted to give it kind of more of a scientific or maybe more objective look at all of these things. And in particular, we're going to actually give you some definitions of what in the industry we use to determine the color of black, because black is actually a very important color. And as we can see, it's probably, in terms of pigment volume in the world, it's probably number 2. White, of course.
After titanium white.
And I could actually be wrong about it. It's actually neck and neck with each other. If we look at like carbon blacks and things, if you think about where black is in objects, everything in our everyday life. So it's important. And of course to artists it is important too. It's not, it is an important color. So that's what we're going to...
And we promise you after this program you will never look at the black the same ways, because George definitely will show you how to read your blacks.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and launch into this program. When it comes to painting, the science behind the colors and the materials used is often overlooked. However, understanding the scientific principles behind the creation and application of paints can greatly enhance an artist's work. One particular area of interest is chromatic blacks, which are mixtures of various pigments designed to create a deep, rich black color with subtle undertones. Are chromatic blacks useful in art? How do they differ from black pigments, such as carbon black and iron oxide black? That's what we'll learn in this video. Black is a color that results from the complete absorption of visible light. Carbon black pigments, for example, can absorb up to 99.98% of light. The greater the absorption of light by an object, such as carbon black paint, the higher the blackness value. Blackness, then, is the lightness of a sample without considering the colored undertone. Deep black coatings can have an undertone, bluish or brownish. A deep black color with a bluish undertone is perceived as richer and darker than one with a brownish undertone. 2 paint samples with the same blackness value and different undertones can be perceived as different blacks. The sample with a blue undertone will be perceived as a deeper black. As the undertone of black color impacts the visual perception of the color black, the hue-dependent degree of blackness is called jetness. Light consists of electromagnetic radiation that can be detected by the human eye. Visible light is usually defined as having wavelengths between 400 and 700 nanometers, between the infrared and the ultraviolet light. Invisible to human vision, ultraviolet light has short wavelengths below 400 nanometers. As the wavelengths become longer, we perceive them as violet light above 400 nanometers. As the wavelengths get longer into 450 nanometers, we perceive them as blue. As we move up to 500, we perceive them as green. Yellow and orange are between 570 and 620 nanometers. Red wavelengths of light occur above 620 nanometers. And as we approach 700, we are in the infrared, which is no longer visible to human eyesight. Why is this important? We can measure and quantify the light reflected from paint rather than relying solely on our perception. This gives us a greater understanding of the sample of paint or color that we're looking at. To understand this better, let's look at the light reflected from samples of a popular artist color, ultramarine blue. This graph shows the spectrum of wavelengths of light we perceived as different colors, from violet to red. The graph contains 4 colored lines. The bottom 2 lines represent 2 different ultramarine blue, a green shade and a red shade, at full strength. The 2 curved lines above these are the same ultramarine blue mixed with titanium white. Ultramarine blue at full strength does not reflect much light and appears to be very dark, represented by the lines near the bottom of the graph, with a low percentage of light reflectance. When mixed with titanium white, however, they reflect more light, represented by the higher percentage of the curved lines on the graph. When mixed with titanium white, ultramarine blue reflects more light in the blue wavelengths denoted by the curve. Much less light is reflected in the green and yellow areas of the spectrum. However, we can see more light reflected in red wavelengths, indicated by the curve ascending in the 700 nanometer wavelengths. The curve indicates the red bias of ultramarine blue that we recognize as the typical appearance of this color. Now let's apply what we've learned to black colors. When we measure the amount of light reflected by black, the percentage is very small, so the line representing that reflectance is at the bottom of the graph, typically below 5%. We may define blackness then as colors with less than 5% reflectance, and usually much less than that. It is difficult to perceive colors at this low level of light reflectance, but we can perceive bluish or brownish blacks or undertones. Black with a bluish undertone is perceived as richer and darker than the black with a brownish undertone. Remember, this is how we define jetness. So if you have a black with less jetness, it is a black that has a brownish undertone. Let's arrange the colors of varying wavelengths of light into a circle, commonly known as the color wheel. This wheel helps us comprehend how different color combinations can produce new colors by absorbing light waves when paint is mixed. When 2 or more colors are combined, they absorb more light waves, reflect less light, and appear darker. To create chromatic black, we mix complementary colors. This is because a single color pigment cannot absorb all the wavelengths across the spectrum. When we mix 2 or more pigments, they absorb more light. For instance, if we mix blue with its complementary color orange, such as burnt sienna, we get a chromatic black. The 2 reflectance curves show that light waves on different parts of the spectrum are absorbed. Burnt sienna absorbs blue light waves, while ultramarine blue absorbs orange and red light waves. There are many different ways of mixing chromatic blacks. What we discussed is a chromatic black made by mixing complementary colors. Another method is to use a split complementary. You start with one color, then go to the opposite side of the color wheel and add 2 adjacent colors from the complementary color of the first one. In this case, the base color is yellow and its complementary color is violet. We move to the adjacent colors, and that's a split complementary. There are more ways to create chromatic blacks. One involves using a triadic color scheme, where you select 3 colors evenly spaced around the color wheel, as in a triangle. Another method uses a tetradic color scheme, which involves choosing 4 colors arranged in a rectangle or tetrad. By blending these colors, you can also create chromatic blacks. These methods provide alternative options to achieving black hues without using pure black pigment. Now let's examine chromatic black paints. These are convenient mixtures or hues. They are hues because the paint is not a single pigment color, but a blend or mixture of pigments. The first we'll examine is Gamblin Chromatic Black, which consists of 2 pigments, quinacridone magenta, PV19, sometimes also called quinacridone violet, and phthalocyanine green, PG or pigment green 36. These pigments represent a complementary color mixture to achieve black. The second chromatic black is Utrecht Chromatic Black. This paint contains 4 pigments, quinacridone magenta, Prussian blue, which is pigment blue 29, nickel azo yellow, or pigment yellow 150, and interestingly, zinc white, which is PW or pigment white 4. These pigments represent a triadic color mixture. Let's compare these chromatic blacks with 3 different black pigments. The first is ivory black, more appropriately named bone black, PBK or pigment black 9. The next one is Roman black, an iron oxide earth pigment, PBK 11. The third is lamp black, pigment black 6. Lamp black is pure carbon and is typically one of the darkest blacks in the range of artist colors. To compare these colors, let's return to our reflectance chart of visible wavelengths of light. When measuring the light reflected from a sample of titanium white, it is represented by a line that is essentially flat near the top of the graph, close to 100%. Titanium white reflects about 95% of the light across every wavelength. On the other hand, black colors only reflect a small portion of the light across all of the wavelengths, which you can see in this graph of 3 black pigments, lamp black, Roman black, and bone black. The differences in the lines of this graph, which are less than 1%, are so slight that they are nearly impossible to see by visual comparison. When we compare lamp black with 2 chromatic blacks from Gamblin and Utrecht, we see that they are flat lines, but have bumps or curves at different locations along the light spectrum. Again, the differences are slight and difficult to see by visual comparison. We need to increase the amplitude of light reflectance along the line to see the differences visually. To do this, we mix each of the colors with white. When we mix black with white pigments, we get grays, and the undertone of the grays become much more easily perceived by our eyes. Lamp black has a bluish undertone, typical of most lamp black pigments, although there are lamp blacks with a brownish undertone. Lamp blacks with a bluish undertone are then perceived as deeper, richer blacks, or have more jetness than those with a brownish undertone. Bone black mixed with titanium white tends to have a less bluish undertone, and Roman black has even less. The undertone is seen in the graph, where the slope in the blue end of the spectrum represents the bluish undertone. When we compare the chromatic blacks mixed with the titanium white to the lamp black, we see the differences in their colors. The bumps in the lines for Gamblin Chromatic Black show the effect of the green pigment in this mixture, as seen by the bump or curve in the green area of the spectrum. Utrecht Chromatic Black shows less dramatic change in the curvature of the line. Still, it reveals a bias toward the violent end of the spectrum, likely due to quinacridone violet in this mixture. Using chromatic black paint can offer unique undertones, different from the black pigments available to artists. However, these can be unpredictable in mixtures with other colors and may be difficult to manage as you tint them with white. We believe mixing your own chromatic blacks is easier to manage since you are already familiar with the pigments that are used in the other parts of the painting.
And that's how easy it is. Although we have questions about, or usually people are claiming that the chromatic blacks are very bright, if you can say this about black, but natural blacks are mudding up the colors. And I think it's kind of wrong statement. It's just because, again, that's what George is showing, and that it's how our vision works. Yes, George?
Yeah, it's, I mean, if you look at a chromatic black, that's what we're trying to show you there. The chromatic black mixtures or paints that we saw and the black pigments, you see that they basically have the same spectral response. So to say that they're incredibly different is not really accurate. And so and then of course when we started to add white to it, we saw the shift, and then you can start seeing the individual pigments, kind of which pigments were dominating. And like in the one, there was the quinacridone, and then in the other, it was the phthalocyanine green. So you can see those particular shifts happening. And whether that's, the point is I mean, these paints are perfectly good paints, of course, but whether that's an advantage to an artist to use or not is another question. But whether now making your own chromatic black mixtures, certainly that's a whole different thing. And that's where it could be very interesting. But where the interest comes into is in the transparency of the black rather than the opacity of the black. And that's why some of these blacks, like for instance, the ivory black or the bone black, because there's no such thing as an ivory black, and the Roman black, which is an earth pigment that has naturally the filler, it's clay in it. So these are more transparent, and transparent blacks tend to be darker. And there's another little trick, of course, and that is gloss. When you have a glossy black, it's much darker than a matte black. At least that's how our eyes perceive it.
Yes, which again with natural colors, probably with bigger particles, the gloss will be much less. It's kind of like...
It depends, again, it depends what oils you use. Obviously, if you use a bodied oil, otherwise known as stand oil, you're going to get a glossier paint film. So, and of course you varnish it. Yeah, so.
Plus, I noticed you put on video, so it's only with titanium white. And of course it's completely different story when you mix the same colors with lead white.
Yes.
And I'm just looking on my swatches here, and it's almost like you working with completely different pigment. And but anyway,
that's what's important in all of, and folks, if you should look at the color notes playlist on this YouTube channel, because what we do is we take all these different colors and we mix them with a titanium white and a lead white, and you can see a huge difference. And that's because, again, the spectral response of the titanium is a bluish. So it's, I made the statement that it's essentially flat, and which is true to a degree. But again, when you start to see the bluish rendering of titanium, when you start seeing that in mixtures. And with lead white, of course, it's not that. Lead white tends to be, as we would say, warmer side, in which case it's just because our eyes are more sensitive to yellow, so we perceive it as warmer. It's not necessarily has a greater spectral response in that area. So that's pretty interesting there. I can, you want to take on a few questions here?
Let's do that.
Then, so let me add this one to the broadcast. I don't know if we can see that too well. but I'll read it out. Says a question for the end. Well, it's not quite the end, but we're going to consider it now. Will
To the end of the video.
Yes, the end of that video, yes. Will glazing with chromatic blacks bleed out the black color and bring out the other colors? And I'm not certain if I understand what you mean by bleed out, but certainly, again, the potential for a chromatic black mixture. Let's distinguish that from a chromatic black paint that we talked about in that video. The two of them are examples, and there are obviously some more available. And a chromatic black mixture. So again, you can when you're doing your own mixtures, you can choose pigments that are very transparent. And we'll show in another video, we'll show the two most common chromatic black mixtures that people make. And if you use very transparent pigments, then you're going to get increased transparency. So that you can modulate or vary that color just by, and you'll see in that video how you can get all kinds of different tints and just by changing the proportion of the sizes and so forth. So it's
the danger, what we noticed through the years already, when people don't understand what exactly colors they're using. So they buy that chromatic blacks and they are thinking that would be, what is it, convenient color they call?
Convenience mixtures, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so we had this one story we tell almost on all our classes. So where one artist, she was trying to paint a black robe, and every time she comes back morning to the studio, and it was pink overcast, and she could not understand what had happened. And then George looked on the back of the tube, and that was the one of the gambling color. And apparently, just because the particles of the quinacridone magenta is so small, so while the color is drying, so the bigger particles going down and the smaller particles going up, and that's why you see that pink overcast, which on the opposite part with Utrecht, it was a little bit greenish overcast. Yes, so it's kind of like, so then you are not owner of that position. So it's why if you do want to make a chromatic black, just make your own. That's why I think what we are trying to say, that unless it's like you don't care much.
Those are convenience, and that's the term, convenience. It's a convenience, yes, but to really fully utilize chromatic black as a mixture in your painting, then it would be much better to do the mixture. And the reason is because you could be working with a particular color, let's say in a shadow, and that color could be part of the flesh tone, and then you can then shade it into a shadow using a complementary, and that's often done, and at least see there's an affinity because you're already working with that color, and then you pull it down, and like I said, we'll show one where we use burnt sienna, which is an excellent color in flesh tones, an example if you're doing portraits or other types of flesh tones. And so the point that Tatiana was making is that if we start using so many different pigments on our palette, then we can have some surprises because we don't know how these pigments will react with each other. And in that particular case, we saw that the pigments were literally being squeezed out of the mixture, and so they tended to go to the top. And that's something that happens in oil paint because oil paint dries slowly, and it has time for the pigments particles to rearrange inside the paint film. So that's a particular interesting part about that. So in answer, going back to Uncle 60, your question, I think that chromatic blacks are useful, but black pigments are really shorthand. I mean, it's a fast way to get to a shade without going through this, this route of all these different colorations and so forth, which could be more complex. So we know that the old masters used that extensively because it was quick and easy. And, we tend to think of the old masters doing these very complex paintings, but they really did a lot of shortcuts in a way. I hate to call it a shortcut, but it really is like a shorthand. They went right for the most essential part of the expression, and they were very successful in doing that. The next question here, let me see if I can, it still doesn't, let me see if I can edit the background a little bit. Well, maybe not.
Okay.
But I'll just, Brenda asks, I have a question. I just painted the background on a painting with straight out of the tube Rublev blue black, no mineral spirits or mediums. 2 coats. It looks a little streaky, and that's possible. Streaky, I imagine you're referring to the matte or glossiness, and that could, that's always a little bit of a problem with different colors. The blacks will tend to show that very quickly.
Yeah. I think on Painting Best Practices, you have special program about how, again, glass changing complete look of the
Right.
Yeah.
It changes
So
the color.
it's just the same color.
The color is not changed, because when we measure it, it's the same, but our perception is different of it.
Yeah. Brenda, here's for future, maybe it will help a little bit. So when you're painting the color from the tube, and especially if it's like bigger particles, or if you can see the, you squeeze the paint, and some is thick, some is thin, try to mix that on the palette, then it will be homogeneous. Because what happened with bigger particles, of course, that's the separation happens. And so when you paint, so on one area it could be a little bit slightly more oil than in another one, and it definitely will show up. And again, it doesn't mean then everything, these things are corrected by varnish, but I understand how it could be frustrating, and so when you lose the value of the paint and painting while you paint. And so I hope it will help for future. So, George, do we have another question?
Yeah, we have one question here from Danielle, and it's not necessarily completely related. Here, let me see if I can, there we go. How can we make more light fast? I imagine what he's saying is paint. Thank you for that question. So use light fast, or use pigments that have a better reputation for light fastness, of course, is very important. And just quickly, the most important thing we can do when it comes to the pigments that are maybe a little bit less light fast, is to use them at full strength. Don't mix them with white. So that's we've seen that in old master paintings. I've talked about examples. There's a very famous example of Vermeer painting with the girl with the red hat. The color of the hat is done with a very fugitive pigment. It's Carmine Lake, but it's in actually very good condition. It has, of course, faded a little bit, but considering it's 400 some years old, roughly about that. That it's really remarkable. So that's really the best thing we can do in that regards.
A lot of love today in the air. Look how much people sending love to us. And so thank you guys. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for being here. And it's very important for us. Of course, we do this for you. And so Uncle is asking, what is the purest black we have?
The purest black pigment that we have, or
black, yes.
or period?
The true black. Black.
I mean, again, what a true black. Okay, there's in the video I gave 2 definitions: blackness, which has to do with how much light is being reflected from it, regardless of its undertone. But humans perceive bluish blacks as a deeper black. That's just an issue with the human visual system. So carbon black is probably the black that gets the darkest. Like I said, some manufacturers are selling a carbon black that absorbs 99.98% of light. So it's almost very nothing, nothing's coming out of it, and it tends to be bluish.
We don't make carbon black.
Lamp black, yeah.
And
lamp black, yeah.
And so we do have lamp black as a pigment, and I made a special program for you just to see how that color looks like, and it's absolutely blue. The moment you are starting mixing with titanium white, it's just going blue immediately.
Which actually can actually substitute for a blue in tints.
Absolutely.
Where you don't want this, really intense blue.
And so since we are answering to Uncle 60, so I'm reading another one. I tend to make dark black colors out of leftover paint. I do get surprises once in a while after it dries. See, it's why when you call us, guys, in our office, we always saying, I mean, lately we had a lot of questions like, if you don't recommend that, why you sell that? And so because it's not recommended for one artist, but absolutely needed to another one. And so here's a very good example. So you see Uncle 60, you obviously okay with surprises, but we do have artists who want to be in complete control, and for them surprise every time it's just almost like death and life. And so it's good that you're that flexible, and it's why we every time saying then if you can use at some point, at any point in your painting, single pigment color, it's better off for future, because simpler your painting is, easier to shoot the mistakes afterwards. And so then you understand, and okay, that was this pigment and I know how to correct. And if you have not only several tubes, but if you didn't read what is in tubes, and tubes have several pigments, so then it's really crapshoot. So go back to questions.
Yes, so there's another one here. To simulate a black iridescent black effect, would chromatic black be best? Thinking of mixing for egg tempera paint. So that's an interesting question. Let's break that down into several parts. First of all, iridescence is a particular effect, and it's created by certain types of pigments that are, we call them pearlescent or iridescent pigments, and it has to do with the way that these pigments are made, and they basically scatter light in a different, and they scatter the light in different colors in different directions, and that gives you that iridescent effect. So you actually have to use an iridescent color to do that. But as soon as you start mixing iridescent pigments with another color, you lose the effect overall. And so that is there are other ways to do this, but not really in artist paints, and so it's we see effects like this on car bodies, but that we're talking about multiple coats of paint where they create that kind of effect. So it's not really, and in egg tempera I would think it's even less possible.
Yeah.
I mean,
because of the nature of that.
Because of the fact that it's a very matte. Medium, and not that you can't use iridescent colors in matte mediums, of course you can, but trying to do that, the best way to do that actually would be to lay in a very dark background first. So you put down your black paint, whether it's chromatic or just, I think black pigment would be the best because it's just simple. And then, unless you want to modulate the undertone quite a bit, but still you could do that with the black pigment and another color. And then lay in an iridescent pigment over that. And in a very thin application of paint. And that would probably be possible with that.
Love that. Next question is, what is the best black for Zorn palette with respect of to cadmium red? What's about other reds? Woo, Denise. So we lost our vermilion almost for 4 years after of course the COVID. We look like
we can bring it back.
Unfortunately, but it's again twice more expensive than it was, and
and it was already expensive.
George is ready to buy, and I'm still don't have guts to do that. And so,
if we get enough people that want it, we will definitely do it. But the tube, a 50 ml tube, was $150.
Yeah,
or $180.
It was no, that was $130 last time. But now if we will
now it'd be almost $300.
Yeah. So it's like no, it's.
I mean, vermilion is a great color. It's just there, and compared to the cadmiums, it's not as overpowering. So it doesn't have quite the saturation. It is opaque like cadmiums. It's slow drying like cadmiums, but it's just and it's that great pink undertone that it develops. It just really
can give that, but
it's very hard to do that in a cadmium.
So, but back to blacks, of course, we put in our Zorn palette, we put bone black,
and that was the black.
Yeah,
I mean, it was called ivory black because
black,
it was might have been of ivory at the time, but actually at that time it wasn't even ivory, but.
Overall, probably the bone black for us is the best seller because people are accustomed to that. Although we do have, of course, much stronger color and much faster drying. It's natural black oxide. And it does behave different because it's much heavier than bone black. Obviously, bone black is very fluffy one. But the time probably natural black oxide dries probably like twice faster. So if that is but
it's much more intense.
It is much more intense. Yes. So again,
much more,
kind of
much greater opacity from the black oxide.
So it's you have choices, and I think the only I didn't cover on our blacks. I think I didn't cover the natural black oxide. I don't remember. Maybe I don't remember. We did.
Yeah, we did.
So
so we did all of the black pigments, mixed them with lead white and and a few lead white and titanium.
So you can see the opacities. That's
you can see the opacity as well as the undertones.
And of course, a lot of people opening for themselves the Roman black because it's very neutral, very beautiful, very easy to use, fast drying again, and so but. Much more neutral than let's say the bone black is on the cool part.
There's another question here. Is the streaking look just light hitting it differently, Neris? It's streaking. So, I mean, you can literally have streaky color, but what I interpreted the previous question was that it was streakiness caused by differences in gloss and matte. So that's a very common problem. It does affect our perception of the color, and we perceive it as a different, as slightly different colors going on, which is probably not the case, especially if we lay in, let's say in this case, it was a blue-black. So if you lay it in, blue-black is made, by the way, of Prussian blue and bone black, and it's a historical hue. It's one of the few that we make. And so if you lay it in, it's perfectly ground dispersed well. So if you lay it in smoothly, you might get a little bit of sinking in where you have all this matte and gloss going on. It would look streaky at that point. So yeah, it's the way our eyes perceive it. It's the way that the light is coming off of the paint film, and this has to do with the surface of the paint film, not actually in the paint film.
And I think Brenda even answering to on-call 60. So then it is. Yes.
Yeah,
so,
CAD
yeah.
red light is the red that we.
No,
that,
no, it's right about what you're talking about. So the streakiness on the and so yes, Brenda, it must be. I mean, usually it's covered by varnish, and so then. But if not, so then let's hope the next time.
Yeah, varnish will help that, and also changing the absorbency of underpaint. Of the underpainting is going to help too. And just going back, Gail said that CAD red light is what most people substitute for vermilion.
At least in our line.
Yeah,
so
and
in our line,
well, it's pretty common at that.
Yeah.
And we are definitely not going to stop making cadmiums, unless of course the manufacturers stop making cadmiums. I don't know if we will take up the burden of making cadmiums, but. It's still a very useful pigment in industry, and that's the only reason why these pigments disappear is because they have no function in industry. It's not because whether artists want them or not. It has nothing to do with that. Here's another question from Phil. For glazing with one of your blacks, which of your mediums do you recommend? I would love to experiment with a black glaze. Well, basically, you can glaze with no medium. Just apply the paint very thinly. And I don't know why artists don't think about this more often. I mean, obviously, they can use oleo gel, which would be better than using a paste medium. Because in other videos in this particular playlist, Artist Materials Advisor, we talk about using paste mediums or impasto mediums as glazing mediums, which a lot of people don't think about, and they can be. But with black, I would think it wouldn't work quite as well, and so a gel would be a better. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just had the conversation yesterday with one customer. So then trying to explain how to use the paste medium instead of oil, because the oil, of course, more oil you bring to the paint, more yellow that will be in the future. But so it's another program. We will talk about this. And yes, that is Chromatic Black. It's a joke, but let's talk about. Daniel started good topic about how to mix the blacks, and so George has a short video we will show right now, and during the video we can talk about how many different possibilities you have by mixing. So we were trying to make as many recipes. Some of them absolutely didn't work for me. Maybe just because I'm not
cerulean blue could actually work quite well, especially with a reddish, or maybe even a little bit more with the. Daniel uses a raw umber with a reddish tone, but maybe with more red.
Do you want to
the
start
cerulean?
that,
So let's go ahead.
And
we'll
so
show you. We'll show you this video.
And this time we will talk over. So it's
Yeah.
Yep. So
and we'll show you the mixtures that.
And then we can read your questions still.
Yeah.
So then please do it. So
here we go.
So cerulean and raw umber.
Yeah.
Oh, now?
Yep.
Okay, now we can. Okay, so in this case, guys, I did do the ultramarine and burnt umber, and it was quite dark. But I can say that. So, in order for you to see the shifting color,
Yeah, and in what we showed in the previous video is that some people think that chromatic black mixtures make darker colors, but in reality, not by much.
Yeah.
Or at all.
Yeah.
And that was the point of showing you the spectrum. So it wasn't, we're talking about maybe a couple of percentages, which is barely.
So again, here's in this case,
Prussian blue leans more towards the greenish spectral, and you saw how the ultramarine has more of that reddish lines coming. And now we can see, we can quantify it and see it's very cool. And you can see how, and maybe it's just the amount of
Thank you guys. Thank you for helping. Yes.
I cut the music. So.
Okay. Sorry, I absolutely didn't think about this. Okay.
We left the volume up.
Yes. Okay. So thank you very much for correcting us. So I have question. I love glazing with oleoresin gel. Absolutely. Why not? It's again preferences. We have people who absolutely can't stay the oleoresin gel because it's, for some people, they feel it's sticky, you see, and for you, it's John, it's absolutely works beautiful, great. I'm happy to hear that. And
Danielle likes Daniel likes slate gray.
Okay.
I keep telling Tanya doesn't like it, but I keep telling her that we should make it. We continue to make it.
So we did it, guys. It's back in stock. So I know it was short period, and in fact, I was so against that color. So and again, I have my my I don't know, feel towards that, because we had this couple customers. One specific one was so mad with me. He called and he was saying then, what the hell is this? What are you selling? It's not a color. And so I truly, I do understand why he said that, because it's for some people it's just mud in the tube. But the moment we said then, or I said, of course George didn't, so I said then we will not repeat that color. Of course, you should see how many people call us and wrote us and had the petitions to bring back. We did. So it's now.
And that particular color, that pigment is a natural pigment from Armenia. So we have to bring it all the way from there. It's but it's an unusual, and it has a very unusual behavior. And we have a couple more that we're trying to introduce, but the behavior is so strange, but interesting, very interesting. I actually like it, but
gooey.
And you know, that's the whole point of the Rublev Colors line, is that every color is going to behave differently, because since we don't put any of the additives in there, which the additives tend to control the behavior of the paint. Since we don't do that, the pigment now is in control of the overall flow and behavior of the paint. So yeah, that's what's very interesting. And for going back to the color mixtures, we show an umber with a.
I can assure you, Maurice, it was burnt umber.
Yeah, it was a cypress burnt
umber, specifically one.
I just put there umber, but I probably should have put.
No, it was burnt umber.
Did I say burnt umber?
Okay. No, I.
Okay. So yeah, so we did, and by the way, that video is going to.
Oh, you mean I should make with just raw umber? That. Was that the question, or maybe?
No, I mean, okay. Daniel said that he does cerulean with a raw umber.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's of course, obviously, how we define chromatic
more
blacks.
Like, I now understand why he's saying then it will be like more grayish, and so
yeah.
Okay, got it.
And you know, it's because you may not be able to get as because with the of course, by the way, cerulean, it depends on what actual cerulean is, because.
By the way, we already made a program about our blues.
Oh yeah.
And so, and again, so the next months we will have one after another. We just started with ultramarines. It's already online. Of course, I needed to show ultramarines first. We have green shade and red shade, and you please watch this program. It's nothing about the different color. It's just how we make them, process them different. And then I took I do believe it was 12 blues as we have in the pigment form, and I mixed the colors. And so watch the program. We will have a smolt. I did already make the cerulean, and again we will talk about, and George mentioned cerulean on different companies are different pigments. So we take
right. Cerulean is some companies call their cobalt chromite a cerulean, which it isn't really. Because the cerulean,
35 and 36. So that it's
they're two different colors actually.
And
and so that's why it's always important.
We will talk about cobalts and cobalt turquoise I will make from the pigment. So, but anyway, this is different program. And
some people may wonder, by the way, why we don't make more of the cobalts, because we have the pigments, and we've been testing this extensively on quite a number of years. But when you don't put an additive in the paint, the cobalt reacts with the oil quickly, and it tends to liver in the tube. In other words, it starts to solidify in the tubes. And so the range of cobalts we can do without the additive is quite limited.
So here we have a fight here. George is saying then we do want to have cobalts in range of our colors. And I really don't want to. We already have one color. It's medium, where we do put additive, because this is only color this color only one company in the world making. It's us, and I'm okay to put that additive there, because
otherwise it solidifies. Very
and
quickly,
many of you, if you bought that colors, you remember that it is solidified after a year. In the tube. So now it's much better, and so we didn't have any problems after when we put additive. And so, but with cobalts, the same slightly different situation. It's what George said, and he described it as a livering. And I don't know, I mean, why to be like everybody else? So I'm rather to do the pigments. And so if you need absolutely pure pigment, you can buy from us, mix right on the fly. Because by the way, why we are doing that mixing on right on the flight here to showing you, so it's very easy. It's really easy. On some pigments, of course, probably a little bit more difficult, like Prussian blue, the particles where the particles are small, it's much more difficult. But with like normal pigments where the particles in between like 40 microns and down, so then it's very easy to mix. And so if you want pure color, you can do for yourself. But so more questions.
Gail asks, will there be links to the videos in this discussion?
Gail, you are lucky you are watching, because no, that would be on painting best practices, and that's good actually pathway so to talk about. Painting best practices are becoming membership website. And so probably from next month. And of course, whoever already a member, we will give 3 months of the
membership.
use, membership on March. But if you are not, so everything you can just afterwards register painting best practices. And it's good things, because it's much more information available will be for you once you member. And the reason why we switched to membership, because George puts a lot of time to that, and you do know whoever already members. And but we don't want wrong people on our painting best practices, because with all the internet, what's happening right now in the world, it's a lot of people what we don't want to see on So wrong people, not like. Do I explain correct? So
Well, basically,
we want only artists who really want to learn. So that's the
yeah. And if you haven't you can register and see some of the information on the Painting Best Practices website. But there's going to be a lot more content. We have courses, and then we're going to take the
and it would be much more affordable than it was before when we sold the whole class for 450 or 650. It depends if it was live. So now you will be able to actually, for small fee, watch that
you can go through the entire Painting Best Practice curriculum, and then of course we have other benefits like we're going to have a monthly meetings with artists, which we've been doing now, called the cohorts, but this will be part of the membership, and so people can ask any question they want about painting materials and techniques.
Stay tuned for that. It looks like we have a lot of questions.
So
let's
we want to go to just real quick. We're talking about blues. Ever consider making a manganese blue? Well, as you probably know, the pigment itself is no longer made. It was manufactured in Germany, and they stopped making it because they just like most pigments, it wasn't a useful pigment. They just stopped making it, and it was expensive, and it was the manufacturing process had to be careful because it was very toxic, although the pigment itself wasn't toxic, but the process of making it was toxic. And so the company just stopped making it. So that's why it's no longer available. Some companies bought up some of the last of it and are continuing to make it. Some companies are just making a mixture and calling it manganese blue, which is not a good idea, but anyway.
So you see, guys, what you're doing, you're just like, cobalts, please. And so I know it's, and Uncle, of course, asking, so why do I afraid additives?
We don't.
I don't afraid additives, but we do more and more research now, finding that certain pigments react certain ways to additives. And we do see that in museums, and you probably see in your house when you look in your piece of art. So when like couple years later, when you finish your painting, so then suddenly white
it's a haze
come up, and nothing bad. You can just wipe it, and your painting will be as new. But then a couple years later, it's appearing up again. And
this is a phenomenon associated with modern paints.
Yeah.
And so when we started Natural Pigments and then formulated the Rublev Colors line, we decided not to use additives. And we're not saying that additives are bad or, because all other paint companies use these additives because it's a production additive. In other words, it aids in the production, it aids in the storage of the paint, but it really doesn't do anything else for you as an artist. So we decided to do without them, and
decided to screw up our lives. So.
It did make that production much more difficult for our colors. Yes, and that's why we have pigments that are very difficult in making them. Not that they're difficult when you use them, but they're just difficult to make them, and so that's why most companies don't want to do that, and it's understandable. But we decided that's what we wanted to do.
And thank you for great words. Thank you, guys. We and again, like I can't pronounce the name. You guys would make cobalts better than anyone else, and that is exactly the reason why we made the cadmiums. Because if you were in our classes 6 years ago or 7 years ago, I would absolutely, for 100% sure, I will tell you we never will touch cadmiums because everybody else doing great job. Why to bother? But again, George is George. he decided to make the cadmiums for you. And so cadmiums, what we make, they're
Don't know
absolutely
additives, yeah.
don't have any additives. So then that's probably why they behave different. You notice that, obviously. And so some people immediately, some people even saying then they notice the difference in color. And I don't know if it's addressed to the additives again, probably not, because the cadmiums are quite strong colors, and it's possible then some companies use fillers, which again,
They're expensive
it's not
pigments, yeah.
yes, it's very expensive pigments, and it's not bad idea for some companies, and so for some colors, but it's not for us. And so so it's why our cadmiums are very strong, and I mean in color. And yes, it's true, you will have separation because it's heavy pigments, and but there are no additives, so they are different. And thank you for your kind words. Yes, we do try to do our colors different than everybody else.
So Gail asks, could you repeat the pigment that solidifies in the tube after a year? And this is minium. Or red lead.
It's red lead. Again, we are only company, and it's not the case right now, Gail. So that's last 2 years. We first we switched to walnut oil, so that prolonged probably the life of that color, probably like another half year, but still was not enough. And then George made the decision to put additive, and so now. As much as I remember, last 2 years we didn't have any problems with medium, unless you have medium before. So then, but we made big announcement about this. We put that on the label, so you do know then this is
Full
disclosure.
There's full disclosure. We disclose not only the oil, but of course if there is an additive, and that's the only one that has. By the way, this manganese blue, the color, the pigment itself was not toxic. The manufacturing process to make it was toxic because it involved a barium carbonate or a barium compound that in that form was toxic. And but there is a patent where they actually made the process was non-toxic. So there's a German patent to make that. But again,
you asked correct. Correct person, so he knows everything about this.
But the point is that it's expensive, and there's plenty of other blues. Again, this is in the industry. There's plenty of other blues that they found that could substitute for it in industry, and so that's why they stopped making it.
Danielle, so no, paintingbestpractices.com. You don't need Facebook, absolutely not. So you just go, and this is our website. It's educational website. We don't have any products there, and we're still thinking. We don't know where. Probably our members will help us to understand where that will go. For now, it's will be membership where you can learn. It's already a lot of lessons there, like George said. But yes, paintingbestpractices.com, and you just register there. You don't need Facebook.
Yeah.
In fact, we do want to take all our great people from Facebook and bring them to the paintingbestpractices.com. So, because we do want to create a society of the artists where we really want to learn from each other, and do not have all that nonsense what now is
in social media. There is a Painting Best Practice Facebook group that we started. Yes. It has now 29,000 members.
But you don't need to be part of
that. But the paintingbestpractices.com is an educational website. It's also a community website. We've got a couple thousand members there. There's not a lot of activity yet, but we're trying to encourage that. And we hope to get more people from the social media onto that platform because of all of the courses, very intense. There's this entire curriculum there. And plus, we're going to encourage other experts in the field to join us. so that they can help artists, because the idea is to really provide help. It's so hard to do that in social media because so many people, they become very angry about things, or they become very touchy about things, and so.
And originally, we even thought then, in the scope of the painting best practices, we will have teachers who will have lessons there for everybody else. And but teachers definitely would need to to be aware what's happening, and it's an least and the most, of course, or the best what we would expect, people who went through our classes, so then they understand absolutely what they are teaching, because there are some great teachers, but the techniques are so bad. I just had the conversation yesterday with one of our students, and it's shame what's happening, and but again, it's all of that happening because of the internet, and so then nowadays it's a little bit crazy. So that's why we want to be like separate groups, so then we definitely can kind of maintain the insanity. So is there any questions?
Uncle has a question about when your white yellows. Well, if your white is yellowed, putting a varnish over it is certainly not going to fix it. So, and by the way, we're going to, there's a very interesting article on justpaint.org, which is Golden's newsletter. And they talk about yellowing of oil colors. And this is a big topic, and there's so much bad information out there about that. They did a really good job, and I do recommend looking at that article. But they left out some important whites in there. One of them is, of course, lead white, and which we promote quite heavily because of its benefits in oil painting, not in any other paint, but in oil painting. And so we want to continue with that work and find out, why do whites yellow, and we have some very interesting ideas on that, and we'll be doing some videos about that at some future point.
Answering the uncle about the subject, does politics ever get in the way of the paint production? Not yet, and hopefully will not be. I mean, the only thing what we of course suffering right now, the first our 13 pigments what we brought from Russia 22 years ago, now it's not available for us, so we are out of stock for Vivianite already for 2 years, for Dioptas already for 4 years.
Because like some of those come from the
Russia,
and, or some former Soviet countries,
and so of course vermilion is coming from China, and it's nothing to do with politics actually, but it's during the COVID, and obviously after COVID gone, or not yet, but still, so the regulations in the China slightly different now, so that's why the prices go up. But of course George already made the kiln, so and we will make a lot of new pigments this year, and we already announced on our cohorts meetings on painting best practices. Then George and I will have more time this year, and we have definitely very interesting trips ahead of us on this this year, and we definitely will find new pigments and new sources, and if the planet Earth is big, so
right, and we are going to be making more pigments in house. That's one of the biggest things that we're going to be exploring this year, and things like Frankfurt Black or Drop Black, Madder Lake. We've already
started Madder Lake.
We've already started laboratory size production, and it's looking pretty interesting. So yeah, so it's going to be very, very interesting about
Here's
that.
a technical question. So cadmium's mixing with chromes. If the last, yeah.
Sure, yeah. So we didn't specifically address mixing cadmiums with our chromes. So there's several chrome colors. They're from the 19th century. The lead chromates. We have there's a yellow. There's a chrome yellow primrose, a chrome yellow light, and a chrome yellow medium. Those are
And
all
again,
lead,
we're only
lead
company
chromates.
who makes that
Yeah,
now.
and hopefully they don't stop making it, because we do buy that from another company. They've already discontinued some colors in the line, but I think these companies are going to continue. There's two companies that currently make it in the world, and hopefully they will continue, because they're nice colors. They're kind of reminiscent of the cadmiums, but they're less opaque. They're not quite as, except for the chrome yellow primrose, they're not as greenish, especially in the lighter areas of where the cadmiums tend to be more greenish, like the cadmium pale or cadmium light. So those are all very interesting colors. And mixing them with other cadmiums shouldn't be a big problem, and mainly because there is a problem mixing some sulfide colors, which cadmiums are, with other, especially lead colors. But the cadmiums as a group of pigments have so very little free sulfur that the problem that was noticed in previous century is not really a problem today. So that's another area where a lot of these painting manuals talk, don't mix lead with a sulfide color like a cadmium, but we haven't seen any issues with that. And this one question, will we be expanding pigments in the Sarah colors? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We're working on that also.
Yes.
And we're going to be expanding that whole line with more pigments. And if anybody is not familiar with Sarah colors is a waterborne wax paint. It is actually beeswax. You paint with it, you thin it with water, it dries, and now it's wax. And you can actually continue painting with it just with heat.
Okay, so oh God. So okay, slate gray from Tuscany, great. That's absolutely that's absolutely great. Okay, so then one day will be mine pigments. Okay, okay.
Pigments on Mars, actual Mars colors.
So I looks like I miss you. For 3 months we didn't do AMA, so now we are back, and so we were hoping to make that shorter, then you guys will not lose an interest, and so, but
and by the way, we are not going to be at the Portrait Society this year. Sorry to say, folks.
Yes.
And it's mainly because we have so much things to do this year, where Tatiana is involved with light fast testing. We've got to get the samples ready this year, and we're doing this with Golden and with Winsor Newton. And so we're very excited. It's a lot of work. So we really, and plus we have some travel plans that are business travel plans, and because we're researching sources of pigment, we're doing some research.
We will miss you guys. And we definitely will miss you.
So we're going to actually be gone probably 2 months this year, not 2 months straight, but 2 different times. So. But it's very important that these things are done. So unfortunately, we won't be there. And we'll miss everybody. But we'll be thinking of you.
Yeah,
for sure.
And we probably will have special deal on website during that time, just because we do understand. And we did this 3 days in Portrait Society all these years. And so we will have special deal again. Check on our website. Thank you guys for the love on Sarah colors. It's very dear for me because I love this line of colors, and so this is definitely very interesting and very unusual, and it's why I so appreciate every each of you, because you basically took the completely new medium and looks like you adapt it, and you know, not only paint with that, you love that. That's great. I really appreciate. Thank you. And so artists lose interest, yeah. So because George saying then our sessions are becoming longer and longer, and I'm thinking like, Jesus, people will lose the interest to talk to us. But anyway, we definitely happy to be here. And again, on paintingbestpractices.com, we will have that regular. So where you like, if you not familiar with cohorts, we had last Saturday of the month, where we spend almost like
2 hours.
2 hours every time.
And artists submit questions beforehand.
Yeah.
They can
and we can stay as long as you need, because we definitely dedicate that Saturdays for you. And so, but we do understand that life is life. We need to, of course, and we see how people drop in and after 2 hours. So anyway, if you are interested talking to us, if you are interested in techniques or the materials, please register for paintingbestpractices.com. And like I said, then at least you will have opportunity if you register before March 1st. So you will have opportunity to have 1 month free. It's not big money, but still it's kind of like it would be our gesture, our thanks to you to be registered at that website. Again, paintingbestpractices.com. And
I'll put a link.
Thank you.
I'll put a link in the below, so anybody could in the comments below the video, not the chat. So.
Rick, I'm happy to see you here. So I know you waited for this program. So yes, we're still doing live. Yes. So, or is there more questions? So, oh yes, cadmium's yellows. Okay, I see viridian. Yes, I actually was trying. You saw on the first video, I was trying viridian and alizarin. Somebody said then. 2 very transparent pigments, and I didn't see the black. And again, maybe just it was me, but then somebody said that they make viridian and pyrrole, which is yeah, that can do it. But pyrrole is so powerful, so I didn't see you know.
Yeah, like I said, sulfides, the cadmium sulfides are not a problem with lead paint. And today, I mean, it was when they were first introduced in the middle of the 19th century. It's not really an issue today. And it has to do with the manufacturing process of cadmium pigments today and the purity of them. There's like 99.3, I mean, there's probably even 0.03% free sulfur or in the mixture, so it's negligible to worry about.
Okay.
Right. So it looks like that's it. And
are any of your kids involved in the? Oh, not anymore. So yeah, send your kids to us. We will teach them. So anyway. Happy Valentine's Day. We will see you next month. We definitely will do AMA. We are returning back to our normal self. And it just, this holiday season just took all our winds out. And so, we are excited to have paintingbestpractices.com as a membership website finally, which George was working 2 years, and it was one thing after another, now almost ready. And so watch our videos, like us. So it's definitely helps us. And so yeah, because I know I'm guilty always too. I'm watching somebody's program, I love it, and I just like I watch and I leave it. And so like us, that would definitely help us. And so thank you very much. See you next month.
Bye now. We'll see you later.